Grab your cocktail and get ready for this episode of the Old Fashion Masonic Podcast. Welcome to the Old Fashion Masonic Podcast, where we talk all things Freemasons while drinking an old fashioned. I'm Brian, and today I've got a guest, Steve. Is it Hessler?
Yes.
Hessler. I said it right and didn't even practice beforehand. Steve, welcome to the podcast, my friend.
Thank you, sir.
So, on this podcast, we like to know as much about the man as we do the Mason. So, let's jump right in. Who's Steve?
Well, I'm 45 years old, lifelong Ohio resident. I just got married about 48 hours ago for the first time. Uh, Lifelong educator going into my 23rd year as a middle school music teacher here in Bellevue, Ohio. It's a small town in the middle of nowhere. It's between Toledo and Cleveland. If you get stopped by a train between Toledo and Cleveland, you found it.
Okay.
That's Bellevue in a nutshell for you, but it's a very nice community, great place to raise a family and that kind of thing. So yeah, that's a little bit about who I am.
Nice, nice. So, you play an instrument or instruments?
Yeah. Trombone is my main instrument, and the thing with becoming a music educator is they'll teach you to play just about everything up to a sixth grade level.
Okay.
So
All right.
I can play Mary Had a Little Lamb on anything. Would you
Okay.
pay to hear me perform on anything beyond that? Probably not.
All right. All right. Well, that's fair. That's fair. So, middle school, lots of personalities and hormones, I can imagine. So we won't even put you in a situation there because there's a lot going on.
No, it's an age group where I just kind of found my niche.
Oh,
I
nice.
went there saying I would only ever do high school and wasn't for me, and never was much of a little kid person. So yeah, it I know they're kind of the redheaded stepchild of education, but
Yeah.
it's where I belong. It's where I like to be.
Well, before my oldest child got into law enforcement, she was a middle school educator and
Yeah.
obviously did that, but track and basketball and volleyball as a coach as well. And she kind of found an interesting niche with them as well. And I think it's probably because she was closer in age or at least looked that and she could speak their language. And, there are generational languages, and I don't think we embrace that enough. And I could argue that in Masonry quite a bit as well. So, okay, so we know who Steve is, the newlywed from Ohio. So push that to the side, my friend. Walk us through your Masonic journey from where you started and where you're at today.
Well, I ended up joining in 2010, so I'm just about at my 15-year anniversary.
Hmm.
Uh, Masonry was always kind of in the background. My parents had me as older parents. They were in their 40s, almost 50s when they started to have kids. So my mom would tell me stories that her father, who would have been my grandfather and passed away long before I was around, she said something about, well, he was in this Masonic thing, and there were a bunch of men who showed up to his funeral with aprons, and if you ever get the chance to be invited into such an organization, you should do that. So she held it in high esteem, but she was misinformed that you were invited, that the parchment envelope would show up in the mail saying you've been summoned
Although
as
that would be
worthy.
cool.
And yeah, yeah. So I spent a lot of time saying, well, I don't know if I'll ever be noticed by this group. And I went off on my own and happened to live across the street from a Masonic lodge at my first job, but I was like, I don't know if I'm going to stay in this community for long, so I put it off. I got another job, and the lodge was 2, 3 minutes from my house. I said, well, I don't know yet. And I ended up coming back to Bellevue, which is also where I ended up graduating from high school. And my parents had gotten older, so it was the idea of being closer to help them through their senior years, and they ended up convalescing pretty quickly. And so I'd come back home and suddenly found myself with no foundation. And it's like, well, I came back here, but like anybody that I did know is off raising a family, or they're no longer in the area. I'm an orphan in my own hometown.
Right.
And I started to look into Freemasonry again and found out, wait a minute, it's not an invitational thing. You just apply for membership. And so at the time, our Grand Master, who would have been Charlie Murphy, who's a great guy to have on a podcast if you have an opportunity, he did a statewide open house initiative. And some guys aren't thrilled with that idea, but that was the idea that got me in the door because I was always just like, well, I'm just going to fill out this paper and a bunch of strangers are going to come to my house and then tell me if I'm good enough. And
Hmm.
but then it's like statewide open house. So I said, okay, I'm going to go to the lodge in my hometown. I'm going to go to the lodge in the college town that I went to. I'm going to go
Yep.
to the next town over and got a real good feel for the community of Masons that way. And that's how I ended up petitioning and joining the lodge. And from there it was the classic, would you be interested in an officer position? And a couple of years later, I end up as master of the lodge, and yeah, 4 times total, but it was like 2 years consecutive, and then I took some time off, you could say, to be a district officer, and
Right.
ended up coming back 2 more times as master again, and yeah, now I'm serving as the Grand Lodge Education and Information Committee chairman. So that's
I
kind
love
of
it.
where my fit is with the lodge system.
Love it. Okay, so you're Grand Education Officer. Any other bodies of Masonry that you've joined, or have you stayed strictly Blue Lodge?
No, I'm a 33rd degree Mason in the Scottish Rite. We actually ended up forming our own valley in our area. Again, we're kind of in this dead zone between Toledo and Cleveland. So when a brother would say, "I'm interested in the Scottish Rite thing," the choice was, well, drive an hour west to Toledo or drive an hour east to Cleveland. And there were enough guys who just said, we've got enough guys that are Scottish Rite Masons or want to be Scottish Rite Masons that we should do this. And we finally pulled the trigger on that, and that was a learning experience even for the Northern Masonic jurisdiction as well, because it's
Yeah,
been quite some time since they started the Valley. So I was involved in that pretty much from the ground up, and so ended up serving as a thrice potent master in that situation and chairman of the board as well. Now that might look different than a more established valley where I hear of somewhere it's like, well, it's 2 years in every office through a 10 officer line,
right,
whereas
right.
we were more of a, this is our skeleton crew of 75 guys we're working
You
with,
got to
and
start somewhere.
yeah, we made it work. So all due respect to those guys who have to work through that more regimented system, but that's what happens when you're doing a startup, and you have to be flexible and say we're working with what we have to make it happen. But definitely a very proud part of my Masonic career is being part of forming that and seeing what it's become. And as of next month, I will be joining the officer line for my shrine, Zenobia Shrine out of Perrysburg.
Nice. Because you've already been a membership chairman and second ceremonial master,
Yes.
right?
Well, I will be coming second
Second
ceremonial
ceremonial
master.
master. All right. Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, that's quite a run there. So let's before we kind of move on here, you also wrote a book. Um, and let's talk about that, and we'll throw it up on the screen for our listeners. But and we'll also throw it in the video description, so for those watching, you can go and click on a link. So talk to us about the book.
Are you referring to the principles proficiency?
Yes.
All right. Yeah. Book would be a generous term because I think it's probably 30 pages total, beginning
Hey,
to
you
end.
know
But
what? That gets the attention span of most Masons.
yeah. What happened was we had a grandmaster who had a vision of trying to do something to make the proficiency experience more accessible, because he
Okay.
was hearing in his experience a lot of guys that were frustrated with the memorization
Hmm.
aspect of that, which in the process of doing this, I'm really fond of pointing out to people, it's not in our Masonic code that it must be memorized.
Right.
It's local lodge tradition, and that's a great thing to encourage your members to do. But there's nothing in the letter of the law that says it must be
Well,
done that way.
most jurisdictions, it's up to the master of the lodge.
Yeah. So he just said, I don't know what it looks like, but I've seen the other presentations that you do. See what you can come up with, and that was a sleepless night because I wasn't sure. That was a big ask that I was kind of blindsided by, and I was like, could go anywhere with this. And I just kind of bolted out of my sleep at 2 a.m. and I knew exactly what I wanted to do. And it takes our mentoring materials in the Grand Lodge of Ohio together with the plain text parts of our initiation ritual and turns it into more of a study course.
Yeah.
So, for example, if you're working your way through the entered apprentice degree, instead of just the canned line of what are the working tools of the entered apprentice, and then you spout off the working tools,
Right.
it says it it lets you read all the parts about the working tools again and says, now, why do you think this tool is appropriate for someone starting their journey in masonry? And it fosters a discussion between you and the mentor, which I think is the most valuable part
Yeah,
because
understanding the essence of it.
yeah, my biggest frustration when I did my own proficiency was I was a why guy. They would say, well, I'm going to ask you what the working tools are, and you say this, and I'd say, but why are they that? And they, oh, I don't know. And I'd be somebody, I'd say, well, why is it so important that we have these words right if we don't know what we're saying? So
The true
I ended up
educator by
doing a lot.
nature.
Yeah, I ended up doing a lot of visiting and traveling and making connections with Masons through the internet or otherwise to just start those conversations.
Right.
And that's where I kind of had the genesis of, well, let's get these guys talking about what was taught in the Masonic degrees and let it be more of a free form discussion. So when it comes time to do your proficiency in front of the lodge, they'll say, you know, what did you learn about the working tools? And you can't really answer that question without saying, well, this tool represents this. And to me, that means that I'll live and act this way.
Hmm.
So you get that information out. And what we heard from a lot of guys that started to sit through those proficiencies for the first time, because of course there were naysayers saying, this is the way we've always done it.
Right.
But that they would come away from that and they'd say, this new guy knows more about masonry than I do.
Well, you're not
And
tainted.
yeah. So that still is one of our proficiency options in Ohio. When you become a Mason, your mentor sits down with you and says, okay, here's the long memorized version, here's the short memorized version, and here's the principles one where you don't have to memorize, but you do have to go in with a game plan of what you're going to say.
Yeah. I like it. I like it. So you're a four-time past master. Let's say tomorrow you're a master again of your lodge. What one thing, only one, because we'd always do something a little different, but what one thing would you do different if you're a master again?
For me, and especially in my first terms, I suffered from the my year syndrome, and it was
Right.
everything was on me. And each time I come back to the chair, it's more of a look, guys, I'm here to lead you and guide you in the experience that you want to have.
Mhm.
And it's not supposed to just be the master is the first person to turn the lights on and the last person to lock the door. But I'd be much more collaborative in terms of what do you want to see? Now let me tell you in my years of experience what it's going to take to get there.
Right. I like it. I think that's fair. And I think that's normal, the first time or two that you go in, it's my year, and you have all this pressure. When you look back, really, all your work is on the way up. You're the spokesperson that year.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's great. So you're going to be busy for the next several years at Zenobia, but do you have any Grand Lodge aspirations?
I think the role I have right now as Grand Lodge chairman is where I fit best. And,
You feel
you know, we'll,
fulfilled?
we'll just yeah, I kind of like being a middle school teacher. I think that was my niche, and I'm really glad to do it this year because the person serving as Grand Master, Bill Carter, he was actually one of the first Master Masons I contacted upon being a Master Mason, and they said you can now visit any lodge in the Grand Lodge of Ohio. So I just started down the Google machine. And it's like what's a lodge nearby, and
Yeah.
so he was just a new senior warden or whatever office he might have had, and says, "Well, oh, sure, come on down and visit." And I've always joked with him that he's like my older brother in masonry that's always had one office ahead of wherever I'm at. That I kind of always go back to him of what's going on and what am I doing, what am I
Yeah.
getting myself into, and
Yeah.
yeah, so it's been a real pleasure to see him go through that journey and be a part of it as his education chair.
Nice. So before we talk about the Z Award, I want to ask you this. Why do you think more men aren't joining Masonry now? Is it a message? Is it an old message? Is it lack of using technology? I mean, are they busy, too busy?
I've started to come to the conclusion that I'm not sure our biggest membership years were big for the right reasons.
Hmm.
When I served as a district deputy grandmaster, and they would say, here's a 50 or 60-year award to present to somebody, and we'd get the guy in lodge, and he'd say, this is the first time I've been in lodge since I was raised. And I'd be like, oh, well, there's three new brothers on the sidelines. What can you tell them about your journey in masonry? And he'd say, well, I only did this because it was the only way to get a job on the railroad. My boss was a Mason, and it was kind of implied that if I wanted to go somewhere, I should do this. And in one of my talks as a district deputy, I went back to the Grand Master's addresses during some of our biggest membership years, and it there was a common strain where the Grand Master would be saying, "We added, hundreds of guys, thousands of guys this year, but I'm not sure they know what masonry is." They're saying, "I'm noticing that he's initiated and entered apprentice in June, and he's a master mason by the end of July. Are they really getting to the root and marrow of masonry?" And so when I hear guys saying, well, we need to get back to those days, I'm not sure we were really representing the craft in its purest form of being this philosophy that helps you guide and see the world. I would much rather be part of a smaller group of principled men than just, well, everybody joins the lodge because that's how you get ahead in this arena or that arena, or that's just where things happen in town. I just know I wouldn't value that experience as much of, well, I'm going to lodge to see and be seen versus I go to lodge, we talk about these core values. How can we enact on them? Am I, as a person, living up to those values, or how am I falling short? That to me is more meaningful than, well, we have made 1,000 membership gain, but they're not going to be involved, and they're just kind of hoping that it pays off down the line. So that would I'd
That
love to
might be
see
the
more
single
Masons?
best answer
Absolutely.
I've ever heard.
Yeah. I would love to see more Masons, but I want them here for masonry. Yeah.
Yeah, there's such a balance. Obviously, I'm with you. I would take quality over quantity. I also know quantity pays the bills, right?
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
so it's a catch-22. You can't have it one way or the other. You have to find that happy blend.
Mhm.
And everyone's masonry looks different, right? When I was coming in, I was headed right to the shrine. I didn't want to be in the Blue Lodge. I didn't care about it until my lodge did their job and made me jump in and see the value and work through to become a master. So, but everyone's masonry looks different. Where some people go for the fellowship, some people go for making themselves better, some people go to the shrine because they just need a reprieve from whatever. But I I think based on what you said about the railroad in Wichita, our lodge at one time was the largest in the world. We had 8,000 members in our lodge.
Mhm.
So at that time, the rumor was why that growth went so strong was a CEO from Boeing had just moved to Wichita in the 50s and he did a bunch of layoffs. Well, the rumor was all the people that got laid off weren't Masons.
Yeah.
Well, our lodge started picking it up and they were doing 24-hour day degree work on
Yeah.
teams,
Yeah.
all but Sundays. And for at least one full year, I've not looked in if it's more than a year, but they were just pumping them out. But for that reason, so when you said that, I buy it. I
Yeah.
buy it. Yeah. And I've seen the same emblem presentations as well as, yeah, I became a Mason and I've never set foot in. I did business with a guy for years, a 60-year Mason. He came in and became a Mason, then the Scottish Rite and the Shrine. He'd never set foot in any of those buildings since then, but he's happy to pay. He believes in the cause and da 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 da. But I think there's a lot of men like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'd be glad to have those men that, well, I agree with everything that masonry stands for, but I have these obligations in the outside world that demand my attention. Yeah, that's great too. Live as a mason,
Yeah,
and
we
let
all
people
know
know
right
you're a
out of the
mason.
gates, you're
Yes.
you're you're told masonry's not first.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's great. So let's talk about this Z Award. This is new to me. Never heard of such a thing. I feel like I'm gonna get a tattoo across my chest with the giant Z or a shirt. Tell me what this Z Award is.
Uh, we actually kind of borrowed the idea from the Grand Lodge of Maryland, so you'd have to dig a little bit deeper to find the true genesis of this. But the idea was doing something to get newer members involved and recognized right away. Uh, you know, we can sometimes fall into the trap, especially in the smaller lodges. Congratulations, you're a Master Mason. What office are you next year? And that's how you become involved. But
Yep.
some men, they're still new to the idea. They've got family obligations to consider, and they're hesitant about, oh, well, now you're asking me for a year long, possibly several years long commitment, and all of a sudden I'm going to be in charge of this organization. Let me experience it first.
Mhm.
So the idea was to get men involved in their local area, and it's just a task list, I guess you could say, of experiences you should have as a new Mason. There's several expected ones, required ones that everyone will do, and then there's a list of optional ones. And I'm going to pull that list
Yes,
up here
yeah. So
real
what are
quick.
the required? This is cool. So it's almost I don't want to say that my words, not your words. It's almost like a forced community type involvement to get you out, and which I like it because sometimes we have to gently nudge and or shove folks into doing the right thing.
Yeah, yeah. The first one is attend 7 stated meetings of your own lodge. And you're allowed to start tracking these from your entered apprentice degree on, with the idea that you'd be completed with everything by 2 years after your raising. So if
Okay.
you think about it, if you're coming back for your 3 degrees plus a meeting or two in between, you're pretty much doing that already.
Yep.
Again, it's kind of where you get into that Wichita Lodge style that you were talking about, of where we're just ramrodding them through, where it's first meeting of the month, you're in your apprentice degree, and we want you to do your fellow craft on the next month. I don't think there's a benefit to speeding guys through there in
Yep.
a lot of ways. So that's how the committee ended up with the idea of 7 meetings total.
Yeah.
So
I buy it.
so attend 7 meetings of your own lodge, attend one stated or special meeting of another lodge.
Okay. I
So
like
it
it.
could be visiting the lodge down the road that is or is not doing degree work. Ohio has this thing called the inspection season, where your lodge performs a degree for a representative of the Grand Lodge of Ohio to kind of just show them we're doing our initiations as expected.
Oh, I
But
love that.
in Ohio, that it's almost a subculture of traveling, where you get your inspection calendar out, and am I going to see you next week at so and so, and what about this week at this lodge, and oh, this lodge always does the fish fry before their inspection.
Yeah, but
So
what a great way, push that to the side. What a great way to stay on top of your game because so many people, they're like, oh gosh, I haven't done degree work in 2 years. Yeah, but if you're proven up, you're staying fresh. It's a way
yep.
to force that where if you don't have study clubs and stuff like, many lodges should. I like it. I like it. So I can hear some grandmasters or future grandmasters listening to this right now and they're like, okay, I like what's going. So we've got 7 meetings and a visit of a special meeting of another lodge. Okay.
Yep. And then also attend one conferral of each degree in your lodge or another, which, usually what always happens is you get your entered apprentice degree, and somebody says, well, as soon as I hear about an entered apprentice degree, we should go visit it so that you can go watch it.
Okay.
So, it's a natural part of the mentorship process that should be happening anyway,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
just kind of a way to formalize that. So that's and then the last one is to set up your membership account in our Grandview system, which is our
That's a great way
statewide
to force
membership
that.
program.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and the secretary will just sign off that, yes, I see Brother Joe Smith has, set up an account with a password, and, not asking you to
But
do
how
anything in
easy is
there other
that to do?
than,
Once you're raised, your secretary can get you set up and nothing. Let me just tell you, nothing is very complicated.
no, no, this
It's
is,
what we should
it's
be doing anyway, arguably.
exactly. It's just kind of a way of formalizing a first year experience for a Mason, I guess you could say. Then in the elective options,
How many
complete,
elective do you have to have?
you need to have five, and there's three, four, five, six, seven, looks like 7 or 8. One is to attend a Masonic funeral. That may or may not happen during your time, but if
Sure.
you take part in that,
Okay.
just attending, that's one. Serving on an investigating committee.
Okay.
sponsor a candidate for membership, perform a part in the Master Mason degree, speaking or non-speaking.
Okay.
Depending on the jurisdictions, we have this role in the Master Mason degree called the Fellowcraft team, where they don't do a lot of speaking, but they kind of add to the pageantry of it.
Yeah.
So that's another easy way to get a
Yeah.
new person involved, whereas you don't need expertise, you don't need to
So
attend
could
seven
one
practices.
argue I went to degree work and I participated? Did I just check two?
Um, I think so. Yeah. We didn't uh specify that in the form
But
per
you could
se.
argue not only did I attend, but I participated in the speaking or non-speaking part.
Yeah.
All right. All right.
All right. It says next one says assist with one lodge event or fundraiser. And
Okay.
that was just very broad because that way, if your lodge does a 5K that they host and
You could
you
hand
just
out
pass out
water.
water, that counts. And if your lodge just is doing a Mother's Day brunch and you help with serving that, that counts too.
Okay.
So again, just something to get you involved in the day-to-day life of your local
I
lodge.
love this.
Assisting with setting up the lodge room, and
Okay.
that can go into the preparation room as well. Because like in my own lodge, we do have a tendency for the preparation room to become a closet when you're not careful, and then all of a sudden, oh,
Every lodge in America is like that. Yep.
yeah. So just help with setting up the lodge room because you can't help but, oh well, the master's jewel goes over there. Well, what's the master's jewel? It's the square. Why is it the square? And
Yeah.
again, you foster what should be a natural conversation in the life of a new Mason. Next one, assist once with the preparation of a candidate.
Okay.
Most lodges that I've been have basically a checklist somewhere in the preparation
Yep.
room of saying, this foot
Yep.
has this
Yep.
shoe,
Yep.
this,
Hmm.
so just you're in there with the stewards, you're just going through the checklist, and you can also end up having a conversation with the new candidate of, well, yeah, when I experienced this, this is what they said to me as well, and here I
Nice.
am as a member.
Yeah.
Assist once with the preparation of a candidate. Mentor one candidate in the degree proficiency, any mode of proficiency. So
Okay. Any
whether
of the
they're
three
doing the
options in
memorized
Ohio.
terms or the principles proficiency. Deliver a piece of Masonic education in open lodge.
That's
And
where people, that'll get some people. They're like, that's not my thing, but I have five
yep,
other options.
yeah. And we do stipulate in there that it can be an original work or it can be a prepared piece that's recommended by your lodge education officer. So
Or
it
like you
doesn't
can go
have
to a
to
minute, the
be.
Masonic minute, and go through something, the
Yeah.
short talks.
But yeah, the short talk bulletins or something, just something to make you part of the meeting.
Love it.
And that was a point of contention on the committee where guys wanted to say, no, they need to have, a 7 to 12 page paper and 12-point font with footnotes. And I said, guys, we already have the Ohio Lodge of Research. We already have the Royal
Right.
Schofield Society that encourages that depth of presenting education. This is just about getting guys involved. So that's why it's open to, well, if you're somebody who's into doing your own research, there's an avenue. And if you just want to say, I'll be the guy who does the prepared reading tonight, it's there for you as well. And then the last one just says attend any district level function, including but not limited to a Grand Master's reception, a cornerstone laying, lodge reconsecration, district association meeting, education, school of instruction, etc. So Ohio is divided up into 25 different districts,
Right.
and those districts have certain events that they do every year, and other districts have special things just for their area. So
Yep.
again, just another way of saying, okay, you've gotten involved in your local lodge. Now here's a way of expanding your network of Masons without necessarily saying, well, now I'm paying dues to another organization, of
Nice.
just growing their Masonic network.
I love that. So I've met my criteria. Now I have the Z Award. What is the Z Award? Is it a lapel pin? Is it a plaque? Is it a certificate?
It is a lapel pin with a giant letter Z,
Love it.
and the border it says, "I am the future of Freemasonry."
Oh, I love that.
Yeah,
I love that. And man, Masons love lapel pins, and this is
yeah,
one that it would really spark conversation, I would think. Or how'd you get the Z? What is the Z Award?
yeah.
How'd you get it? Oh my gosh, I'm so close.
Mhm.
Okay, I
I,
like it.
I told some guys, I said, you always get to that point in the year where you start saying, we got to start thinking about officers for next year. It's like, well, look at the guys with the Z award on their lapel. those are the guys that are already getting actively involved in your lodge and interested in the future of the organization.
I love it.
So it kind of sets you apart right
Yeah.
there as I'm somebody who's really buying into this and want to see it be a part of this into the future.
I love that. I love that. So before we close out, I'm going to throw you a curveball.
All right.
I'm going to put four things up on the screen. The most important question of the podcast, and one must go forever, my friend. So on the screen, you have tacos, any kind, pizza, any kind, any flavor, any crust, any topping, wings, they can be dry, they can have sauce, burger, any way you want. One of these has to go forever. It was never invented, which means nobody else in the world ever in the history could enjoy it again. What would you, brother, get rid of and why?
Oh, my initial thought would be to go between the burgers or the tacos because they're both beef products. So you're kind of double dipping there.
Fair.
But having started this new life with three teenage boys in the houses, I've had my fill of pizza. So I will take pizza off that list because
Pizza is
I,
out. You have destroyed
yep,
the future of America. The
yep,
Carney Boys from Wichita, Pizza Hut was never invented. So, but pizza's gotta go in the Hessler house because the damn teenage boys and the
yep,
teenagers, they're just shoving it down their throat too much and
yep.
you can't have it anymore.
There
So,
you go.
brother, I appreciate you. Thank you for joining the Old Fashioned Masonic Podcast. Cheers.
Thank you.